Hello there, and welcome back to our time-lapse series. In today's episode, we will continue on Space Mountain and the area in front of it. As you might see, this will be a long video. I wanted to give you something special, because I will be 2 weeks on vacation. Later in the video, I also talk a little bit more about that. Today, as I'm recording, it's the 27th of September, and yesterday, Frontier showed their third deep dive. And so I wanted to talk about that today, but not only about it, also about the process of getting back to those rides like Space Mountain and Big Thunder Mountain, which you probably saw the POV, and just giving you a little insight on my experience, how I come back to those rides after all this time and make those rides now actually a playable diorama that you can play in Planet Coaster from the Steam Workshop. But first, let's come back to Planet Coaster and the deep dive. So when I watched the deep dive, initially I was a little bit confused maybe, because I thought it's about dark rides and about those coaster mechanics when you have a tilting coaster or a drop track or something like that. And so I thought they talk about that. But instead they focused more on the management features and showed some diagrams how the UI basically looks, and also show what's in the deluxe edition of the game. And so when the deep dive started, the first thing we saw was this park expansion feature, where you have, they showed like this pretty interesting park, which is pretty unrealistic, but I mean, it's okay to show that. So you have those basically on the left and the right side, those elevated slopes, and in the middle you have a Grand Canyon. And those three parts are basically sections that have different limitations to them. And I found this idea quite interesting because it got my mind pretty excited, because it reminds me a lot of, I mean, you probably know City Skylines. And they had this feature where you have your city, and then you have expansion slots in a grid pattern, so that you can just expand your city in every direction. And just imagine how amazing this would be, to have one main park, and around you have a series of land you can buy and own, and build different parks also there, and they are just in the background, so they don't get rendered in real time. So they are just a little thumbnail or something that just acts as a background image. But it keeps the immersion up, that there is something, and not just like it's in Planet Coaster 1, for example, where you just have a green landscape and there's absolutely nothing, and suddenly you have your super park there with 20 coasters or whatever. It just feels a little bit unrealistic. And maybe this could enhance this immersion, that you have multiple parks and that your park is actually surrounded by real stuff. But also this would help with the performance issues we constantly talk about, because then you could outsource this piece count problem over multiple park expansions. But after all, I don't think that they will go in this direction. They probably make it like the system they showed us, where you have one whole map that's pre-limited in their size. Maybe you can modify the size like in the first one, but then you have can draw out different sections of the park and have those areas that you can then later modify. Okay, there you can place down trees or paths or something. And sure, it's a great feature for making a scenario for the players much more challenging. But in the end, it's not that relevant to me as a pure builder. But again, this topic really got me dreaming big. So the next thing we saw was they talking about management features and showing the different UIs they have for that. And I was a little bit, you could say uneasy. I mean, when I look on those UI panels, the first thing that comes to my mind, why make UI panels covering the whole screen? Because then it disconnects you from actually being in your park. And that's, I mean, this is the best thing. You want to stay in your park because you're building on your park. why go out of your park? I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, I could understand it if there's so much stuff, useful, detailed stats that are actually vital for you, but I see so much free space. I mean, cut out this free stuff and just make it a little pop-up window over your park, because then you can still see your park in the background play out and you don't lose this immersion that you are actually in your park. It's a bit weird because on this panel, for example, I think they did a good job. I mean, it's a decent size. The only thing I don't like is the slider on the right, because I don't want extra work to see those stats. I just want click on an item and it shows me the information about it. While other creators played the test build of the game, there came up this discussion about the UI, and while they building scenery and they pick an object and they try to place it, and in the same time or in the same second the UI closes down to have more screenage to actually place it. But I just find this also very terrible, because it doesn't allow you to quickly and efficiently build in a short time. And also in Black Coaster 1 you had this system where you would place something down with advanced move tool. I mean, you can see it here in action while I'm doing this roof. I'm constantly using this technique because they are in a certain angle already placed down. I don't have to go back into the shelf and pick another object, place it down in the game and rotate it in the exact same location. And that's the big time saver and efficiency booster. When you don't get this feature in the second one, I think it will be horrible in the terms of building efficiently. I have still a little bit suspicion that they, when they showed this, I think the game was still in alpha state, and maybe they showed the console edition. There it would make sense in a way, because in a console edition you have a lot more work to do, I think, with the controller to make it easier to place down, and therefore it would be quite okay when the UI closes down that I can control exactly how it's placed, and then I press a button on the controller and it gets me back into the menu. But on the PC you can save this step, and I just hope they include it in the final release, or maybe in the first update that we see. So after they showed the management features, they basically showcased the coaster they have built. And there I was quite exciting, because it was a dive coaster, went straight into the, basically straight vertical into the ground below. And when I saw this POV, I kid you not, I was so in awe, because the transition when the coaster train entered the tunnel and suddenly everything was black, and that's exactly how it should be. And while the train is going through the tunnel, you can see this shiny reflection on the track actually, and at the end you see this big bulb of daylight and complete contrast, and this sweet transition from this contrast from the darkest spots to the brightest spots while we going with high speed through this tunnel. It just looked so amazing. And it also means that when this is the actual game graphic system, the lighting system, the GI, global illumination, that means that we can do dark rides now in a properly fashion. There's still a little bit of concern in me while I saw this, because we only saw it with landscape done. So it's the question how the lighting will perform in the same way or in a different way when you use artificial pieces for the tunnel. So in my opinion, I think that this feature, or this essential piece of the game, it's so important because it allows us, and especially people that are more focused on realistic builds, it will allow them to make this immersion, that the ride actually feels like like imagery. This POV image I showed, it looked so realistic. In a way, it was also very scary at some point, because just think about a second what you can do with that. You could almost fake a real POV. It contradicts a little bit, because everything other than that, so all the scenery and especially the people they are a little bit more comic-y, so they counteract that. But there will be mods, or I'm certain that people will make realistic people and animate them also. But in my opinion, I think that this technology of having this realistic lighting in the game is the real selling thing about the game. It's the $1 million thing. It's what people strive for when making rides, because they want to make it most certainly very realistic. It's so amazing to see that. Great job, Frontier. Another thing they showed was this selection screen where you can pick your ride. On one ride in particular, it said the powered rotating ride. And it said in the description, with guests boarding via a conveyor belt. And this simple sentence implies that there will be more enhanced or more advanced stations available. We didn't saw them, so there's this rumor that Frontier keeps certain things behind the curtain, so they don't show us that. Maybe to keep us hyped for the next one, or just that they fear a shitstorm when something is not working. But nonetheless, this means that I think they will implement a station system where you can have a separate loading area and unloading area. And this is of course very important, again, to make realistic builds. So happy to see that. And another little side note to that, before we continue, in Planet Coaster 1 there's still this huge, really absolutely it's completely comical huge station that we can't modify the station, so it's always very heavy, and you can't remove those visible fences that there are. So currently I'm doing the Space Mountain, as you know, and I have this issue there. The room of this station is very small. There's not much space in there, and the vanilla station of Planet Coaster is bigger than the room actually. So you have to tweak that a little bit to make it work. And also those annoying fences, I can't remove them. They are just there. So please, Frontier, let us make a little checkbox, please, where it says disable fences, and you can just disable those fences if you don't want them, and just make this station a little bit smaller, or maybe make it like a modular system where you can add like 2 meter or 1 meter sections where you have different sizes there. So it's not just a rectangular blob. It's actually a dynamic system where you have an unload system, a load system, in-between system maybe, where you also have the first pass in between. You have multiple exits there, and maybe even an emergency exit. So if there's something not working on the ride, people could actually walk down the catwalk and exit the ride if it breaks down. It would be absolutely awesome to see something like that. Mind-boggling. But again, just remove those annoying fences, please. For the last bit of the deep dive, they showed then the rides, or this ride pack, this vintage ride pack, when you pre-ordered the deluxe edition, what you get. And so you get some rides, and you get also, I think, 3 wooden coasters. One coaster in particular, it's a very classical looking wooden coaster, I think. And I'm a little bit confused why it's in a vintage pack, because this wooden coaster, maybe it's a variation. I think also people might mention that already, that it's a variation of the classic wooden coaster. That's part of the initial game, but I just don't know. Maybe they do it like that, but however, I just found it a little bit confusing because wooden coasters are so essential when you have a game that's called Planet Coaster. Don't lock one of the greatest coasters behind a paywall, basically. Although paywall, maybe it's a bit mean. I mean the DLCs of Planet Coaster, it's absolutely in a decent balance, I think, for what you get actually. Also from Planet Coaster 1, I think those DLC prices, it's okay in today's world. I mean, they are way worse models from games that have DLC policy like Crusader Kings or some other games like The Sims. To round this topic up, it's quite okay what we saw. Maybe the management features a bit too much of them, but I mean, when it's the main content of the deep dive, it's okay. But again, I think the main driving point and the selling point for Frontier is actually this lighting system. It's absolutely looking so amazing, and I don't know why they don't show that more, because I think this will be the big selling point. I don't think that the water parks are so essential for the game, actually. I think it's more the coasters, and since it's called Planet Coaster, and the complete framework that we get from combining all those features. We get the graphics, we get the rides, the coasters, we get the path system, we get this amazing experience of having guests in our park that can interact with those things. And you could say that all those things also about Planet Coaster 1. In the second one, they are of course now enhanced and more refined, you would think, right? And so I think this complete package, you don't get this whole experience in any other park management game. There is just none. I mean, there is Parkitect, which is of course a lot simplified. I don't even think that you can compare them to each other. They are so completely different. The only other game that comes to my mind is Roller Coaster Tycoon World, and it failed miserably. So they are alone at this market, pretty much. And I would like that Frontier would just drive this uniqueness home. It's so strong, and let the people be aware no other game is there that offers such a variety in their creative tools to build a theme park. But yeah, those are just my little thoughts about Planet Coaster 2. I hope you enjoyed so far, and please let me know your opinion about the latest deep dive and how you in general feel about the game. Now I will talk a little bit more about Big Thunder Mountain and Space Mountain and how I redo those projects or those rides and make them, basically upgrade them a little bit more so that they are nice and clean and presentable. The goal here is to make a diorama to be uploaded on Steam Workshop. Also, you can check it out for yourself if you didn't already. And so Big Thunder Mountain, the thing was here, I was a bit in a struggle because the upcoming vacation I can't really say it off. And that's why I was a little bit in time hurry to produce something to not let you guys down. And that's why what I've thought was to not go into the endeavor of creating Space Mountain in like under a week, because Space Mountain in its current state is not that far than Big Thunder Mountain. Big Thunder Mountain was, as you see it in the workshop, to 90% done. And so I had only the steps that I did to make it a whole experience was just to make it, to limit it at the border, to have a nice layouted space, and also to make it actually operatable, because this is really difficult in Planet Coaster to not only have it as a visual attraction but also operational in the game mechanics. And yeah, and this was quite complicated to do because, oh god, those paths, I can't collide paths into each other, and that's the big problem here, because the queue of Big Thunder Mountain it goes on 2 levels basically. So at the start you go into the queue begins to guide you underneath the station basically and gets you through the main area, and then you go up the station to the actual train and ride the attraction, of course. And to make this transition between the upper level and the lower level, because you have this path go underneath the track of the ride, it was very it was not satisfaction. It was just a struggle and a mess, because you have to basically remove the track, lay the path, and then go back in the track, lay the track again, because the track can have no collision, but only the track, not the station. You have to keep that in mind. The station needs to have space in order to be placed, and that's why it was particularly very difficult to make that thing work. And also where the queue basically goes up along the station and goes then into it. And the idea was, because Big Thunder Mountain has basically 2 stations. So you have on the one side one station, on the other side another station. You have 2 tracks, both go into each other after the loading operation. Yeah, and so I had to fake this second station, this second track. But overall, the ride was done basically from the track layout and also the scenery. I had to a little bit add a little bit rock work on the side where Big Thunder Mountain ends, where basically there is no road there. So I just modeled in some flooring that you have actually some people that can walk up to the end of the road there, and just make it nice and tidy so it looks really good. And then the natural part of recording it and make it a true experience like in the real world. So please, if you didn't check it out on Steam Workshop or watch my POV of it. And then I come to Space Mountain. Space Mountain is by far not so finished as you may think. It's partly true, it's partly not true, because initially in 2019 I mostly finished Space Mountain, but the ride was made without a blueprint, so it was pure speculation if the layout is like that. So it was a guessing game, and it's really not that accurate to my standards. So what I did back then was the queue that goes into the big dome, not the queue buildings on the right and left in front of it. I did not make those. They are pure decoration. There you can't go in them. Of course, the station, then the ride itself, then the animated lift hills, and yeah, it was okay. I mean, it was okay at this time in the progress of this project. But now everything changed because you know I made this video about the introduction and this whole project, and I want to make it the same in the same quality, at least like Big Thunder Mountain as you see it on the Steam Workshop. And this, of course, needs to be solid, yeah. So the thing I did on the current remastered Space Mountain is to actually make the interior for the right and left queue building. There are only a few POVs that actually are 360 degree, and also that they start from the very first beginning where the queue starts. Most POVs start when you sit directly in the ride before the lift hill. And so yeah, this was the main challenge, to make those interiors look good. It's already 30 hours, I think, I worked on it. And I now have those two queue buildings with the full interior done. Also started a little bit on the lighting and the backlot on top of the roofs, maybe including even a firework. But yeah, the biggest hurdle now is to do the interior. I want the interior of the ride itself, because it's so mystified when you see actual POVs of people when they are during a ride shutdown and you see suddenly the lights go up. Those are magical moments, and I want to recreate them, of course. And you know, this is actually quite an interesting topic, which I might do a full episode on. It's basically this capturing those magical moments. It's not maybe even so necessary to recreate it one-to-one, so that's absolutely accurate. And such tiny details are absolutely helpful with that. But let's get back to Space Mountain. And the question there is to ask is how to do Space Mountain now a second time, much more accurate and properly. And the first answer I can give you is we use blueprints for that. And I'm currently at the step where I do the interior of the ride itself. It's done to 60%, I would say. So the current thing would be adding custom catwalks, support structures, everything that's basically used in a backlot or in infrastructure. And yeah, just give this place some life. In the end, you may only see a dark ride, but I will cut the POVs in the following order so that you see first the POV when it's dark and then the POV when suddenly the lights go on. And also, of course, the full queue layout and how to make that. There's also the same problem with, like on BTM, where you have this queue colliding problem where two paths go very close or are on two different levels and they are very close to each other. And it's really messy. That's one thing I hope for Planet Coaster 2, that they just get rid of all limitations and colliding stuffs. I hate this. Just leave us those tools. We make sure that it works. But yeah, I hope that I could give you a little insight on how this situation is right now. So because I'm in such a hurry, I don't want to rush Space Mountain. I don't want to rush it. It will be messy, and I mean, I tried the last 3-4 days constantly building with almost no break between it, and I think that was 30 hours of building, and it just exhausted me. And but there's still so much to do. I can't. when I now would release it's just half done. It just not performs at its level, you know. And I want to present it as good as I can make it, and for that I just need more time. And therefore you have Big Thunder Mountain now. Chronological, it doesn't make any sense because we are still at Tomorrowland in the time-lapse series. But I mean, hey, you got Big Thunder Mountain. and when I come back, hopefully within some days or maybe a week, Space Mountain. And from there on, there are only, I think, 4 to 3 weeks to the release of Planet Coaster 2. I mean, it's getting pretty excited then. And I think there's only one deep dive, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it will be very exciting to see this whole thing play out. And maybe a little last note to the poll I started on Discord about how we should continue with this whole project. As always, I think about it, and I came to the conclusion, it's not final, but so far I think it's pretty certain actually, that I will start Disney World, the Magic Kingdom in Florida, in Orlando. And the main part why I choose so, it just makes more sense. Just imagine all that you are seeing right now, all the time-lapse series, and even before that, the whole introduction video, everything you saw until this point. And there is so much footage that's still to come. Just imagine that for a second. Those same stuff we would do a second time. And when I realized that, I thought, I mean, why I don't have any means and no fun to do that. Because, I mean, it's so much effort. And for what? Just to have the performance benefits? No. And I mean, the park is there in the game, but I constantly make videos about it in a more fast-paced way. And when I do those POVs, you will not see the bottlenecks of the performance. And in the end, I think it's much better to just start over, but with a different park, since it's way more entertaining also for me to conquer a new and challenge me with a new park that I not know so far. I didn't see much of the Magic Kingdom, and I think it's just gives me a little bit more, you know, motivation also to continue and not do the same stuff again for 2,000, 3,000 hours. And there's still no guarantee that the game will perform better than the first game. It will, most certainly will, but I don't think that we get 60 FPS. Certainly when the park is done. So, but yeah, it's the big question. I mean, how would you decide in such a situation? Would you redo the whole park just for the sakes of it? At first, I had this opinion of actually doing the park a second time. It just feels like so much work. And also the whole work we do constantly that I did back to 2016, it's some kinda useless in the end, because when you see everything in the new engine and the new game, why would you bother watching the first game, the first version of the park? I could understand that it's maybe cool to see the comparison between the two games with their different pieces in relation to how the park is built in those games. But in the end, I don't think that this is a real benefit. I mean, we could end up with 2 parks in the end. I mean, it's double the work. But again, if I do the same park a second time, it's also the same amount of work. It's only 2 different parks, and that's the thing I think is most valid, because then you get a direct comparison between the Anaheim park and the Orlando park. I think this is much more, there's much more value at the end. And I probably will stick to this decision, although maybe we wait a little bit how the releases from Planet Coaster 2. But already I started with watching videos and POVs and get a feel for the new park and try getting my mind into it, how it works. So yeah, it will be exciting, guys, the couple of next weeks, and hopefully the game will be a huge success and it will be great to play it. I mean, it's pretty certain that it will be. It's just the tiny gritty details that I'm also curious about. But if you made it until this point so far in the video, I truly want to thank you that you invested your time in preparing this, and I want to leave you with a little anecdote. Everything started with Disneyland Anaheim. Everything started with Planet Coaster 1. The sequel was Disney World. The sequel was Planet Coaster 2. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, subscribe, like or comment, and make sure to join our Discord server. If you want to see more, make sure to watch my interaction video or check the playlist of the timelapse series. Or check the new playlist of the POVs. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Goodbye.